Hey, greetings to you all. Thank you so much to be part of our webinar, whereby today we'll be focusing on animal welfare. And then thank you so much also to make it up on time to join us on this beautiful session. In this session, we'll be going to deeper on what is the role of our NSPCSA, on what they are doing to assist us to promote our animal welfare. I myself, I'm Khomotso Mashiloane, a livestock technical advisor at the Red Meat Industry Services, and I welcome to you all. And here in the studio, being joined by Mr. Navesh. Mr. Navesh, kindly please introduce yourself to the guests.
Hi, good morning, Khomotso. Thank you for having me. My name is Inspector Navesh Singh. I am an inspector in the Farm Animal Protection Unit of the National Council of SPCAs. We are basically involved in promoting animal welfare in the farmed animal sector, and we work in all 9 provinces in South Africa, in all manners of agro-industries where animals are kept, housed, transported, slaughtered, and for various reasons. Thank you.
Okay. All right. No, thank you so much for joining us in. It's always a great pleasure for us to be able to get such great insights. So how is it going to work in this session is that we will be recording the session. So those ones that they've missed some of the questions, or maybe those ones, let's say they want to catch up on the session is going to be put on our YouTube channel, which is Red Meat Industry Services. And then also you have a chat box and a Q&A section whereby you can, interact in the meantime. We'll be just checking your questions along. And then this session also is going to be a question and answer session whereby we'll be asking some of the questions with our facilitator or our guest today to engage on that. So without a waste of time, let us get on the bottom of this, Navesh. All right. So my first question to you is that what is the role actually of an SPCSA? How are you guys working, and what is it in a nutshell? Because some people, they just came across with this name, but they don't know. What is it? What are you guys doing specifically?
Thank you, Khomotso. So the acronym SPCA stands for the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. Our core function is obviously to prevent cruelty, and we achieve this primarily by education. So we educate the broader public and animal owners on the humane treatment of animals and how animals should be kept in terms of legislation and legal requirements. Whilst education is key, we also make use of the legal systems available when there are contraventions of the Animals Protection Act, which is the primary act relating to animal welfare in this country. Uh, we conduct routine inspections at facilities across the country. Within the NSPCA, we have different units which are mandated, or we basically deal with different animals. So the Farm Animal Protection Unit obviously takes the welfare of farmed animals into consideration. And then we have our Wildlife Protection Unit. They deal with the wild animals. We have a Special Projects Unit that deals with illegal dog racing, pigeon racing, dog fighting, for instance, horse racing. And we have a unit that also is in charge of SPCAs in the country. They basically ensure that all the SPCAs are compliant in terms of the rules that govern the SPCA movement in this country. Apart from the enforcement of the animal welfare legislation, the National SPCA, or the National Council of SPCAs, is a statutory body, and we have our own act, which is the SPCA Act, the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. And that is basically where we derive some of our functions from.
Very interesting. So you mentioned that you're also working in farms. What are the common issues related to animal welfare do you sometimes encounter, and how can farmers proactively address them?
So during inspections, we make use of available standards that have been published through the South African Bureau of Standards. For instance, we have a pig welfare standard. There's a standard for dairy farming. There is also the crocodile standard, which has been published, I think, in 2009. We have one for ratites, which involves ostrich welfare. We have a standard for sale yards and hawking sites. And there's also one for the long distance transportation of farm animals. So these are just supplementary standards which have minimum requirements for animal welfare. And those are benchmarks that we use in relation or in addition to the Animals Protection Act. So when we go out to conduct inspections, we got to basically have a view of the entire farming practice. So the primary aspects that we look at is the health of the animal, the provision of food, water, and shelter, and the basic living conditions of the animals. So we look at like I said, those are the primary requirements in terms of the standards and in terms of what legislation dictates. So we look at these, the different sectors on the farm. If the farm is got multiple animals, we have to look at all the animals. Obviously, biosecurity is something that we consider as well because of the outbreaks of avian influenza, for instance, or African swine fever, uh, the foot and mouth disease. So we got to be careful as well how we attend these inspections. So in a nutshell, we basically look at the provision of food, water, shelter, and the health of the animals. And then we take it from there as to whether this particular farm is compliant in terms of the standards and whether the provisions of the Animals Protection Act are being met. And if there are any inadequacies, we make recommendations in the form of written warnings or written recommendations for compliance.
Hmm, very interesting. So, like you just mentioned about the issues of housing and health and all that, because I also heard that animals, they have rights, or I can call them freedoms. Can you at least take us through that?
Yes, so there are basic when you talk about rights, the Animals Protection Act, like I've stated, is the primary legislation. And in terms of freedoms, there are 5 different freedoms associated. These are freedoms that come from international organizations, and South Africa has also adopted the 5 freedoms for measuring welfare.
Hmm, okay. So then what role does SPCSA play in educating the farmers about animal welfare? And also, what are the resources that are available to assist these farmers? Some of them, they'll say we are struggling, or some of them, we don't know when or how to use, let's say, the technology that is available, such as, let's say, Broader and so forth.
Okay, so within the Farm Animal Protection Unit, one of our core portfolios is, or objectives is, to conduct inspections at emerging farmer communities. This is also what we do with all other facilities, whether it's commercial or emerging farmers. But with regards to emerging farmers, we have a specific role in terms of going to different communities across the country and having a look at how their individual practices or are implemented. So we would recently we were in the Western Cape where we did inspections of a facility in the Bredasdorp area. So unfortunately, at the time of our visit, we did not get any of the farmers available because they also have other jobs, and sometimes being a farmer is not the core function that they do. I know on previous inspections to this community, we did assist the farmers to create drainage systems because the animals were living in waterlogged conditions. So we, in addition to educational material that we hand out to the farmers, we also physically assist them, if the animals are in a compromised state. So we did dig trenches to allow for the water to drain out. We assisted with erection of shelters. It's not something that we actively supplied, the material. It was material that was existing. So we merely assisted the farmers from a advisory point of view. We also then, like I said, we hand out educational materials. We have booklets that we have printed for the farm animal welfare sector, and we have one for working animals as well, like your donkeys and equine, in addition to the other farm animals like your cattle, sheep, goats. So we at this stage we go in, and education is basically what we provide. Whilst we do that, we also try to get donations of food and equipment. We have a donkey and outreach inspector who goes out to communities and educate them on donkey and farm animal welfare as well. So we do a lot of outreach as well with the different farming communities. And if we have resources available that we have managed to secure from donors, then we also provide those to the farmers. Like milking cream, for instance, or for the donkeys, we have harnesses that are made. And then, disinfecting of properties, we have stuff like that, for like the enclosures, for instance, or the animals themselves, to provide parasitic control, for instance. We do that as well. And we also then, if the communities have animals that need to be sterilized, we also have outreaches in that regard, where we get veterinarians in to assist with sterilization of domestic animals and primary care for farm animals, primary veterinary health in that regard as well. I'm not sure whether that answered your question.
So this farm is compliant, or is everything's being well managed? Navesh, are you still with me?
Sorry, could you please repeat that, Khomotso?
All right. I was saying, since you have visited, they are of compliance. So what are the key indicators that you can see that this farm is well managed and it's welfare friendly?
Okay, so when we enter a facility, be it a commercial farm or a emerging farm, I mean, from the entrance, you can tell if you're going to find problems or not. And one of the key indicators, it's just the general condition of the farm. If a farm is well kept or maintained, then I'm sure there's not going to be much problems. But from the outset, if you enter a facility and you can tell, we're going to find problems. So to answer your question, a well-run farm, the animals, for instance, they will appear to be in a physical condition that is, you can see that these animals are in a good physical condition. They are vibrant. The animals are not lethargic. They are not sleeping or lying down. They are grazing. They are ruminating, the way they should be. Obviously, the living conditions is one of the key factors that we look at. There should be, or there must be, protection from the elements. Whilst it is a common misconception that animals don't need shelter, the law is clear. All animals that are confined or within a confined environment, they need to be able to access shelter to protect them from, all weather conditions, extreme heat, cold, wind, rain, those sorts of things. And, whilst there may be provisions of shelter, they need to be adequate in terms of the number of animals on the farms. So those are the key indicators we look for, suitability of shelter, availability of shelter, conditions of animals, the way the farm is actually maintained, pigs, for instance. A lot of people believe that pigs need to be living in dirty, squalid conditions. Pigs are very clean animals. They actually do not dung in the same area where they feed, for instance. So, you cannot confine an animal to a small enclosure and expect the animal to perform bodily functions in the same area where it's going to be eating or sleeping. So, these are the things that basically are key areas to look at in terms of ensuring that welfare is uh, being maintained at these farms.
So there are like animal husbandry practices that farmers will normally do, such as vaccination, dehorn, castration. Is there any
Sorry,
guidelines
Khomotso.
that exist for human treating of this?
Sorry, Khomotso,
Can you hear
your
me?
line is breaking up. There's buffering. I did not hear all of what you had said.
All right. I was saying, can you hear me properly now?
I can hear you now.
Yes, I'm saying there are animal husbandry practices that they are into place. Farmers, they have to do vaccinations like now for cattle is around for lumpy skin. They are doing some dehorning, castrations, and all that. Is there any guidelines that exist for human treating or handling of these animals from your side?
Yes. So with regards to these husbandry practices, a lot of them are obviously required and are necessary. So with vaccinations, for instance, one needs to ensure that they have adequate needles or syringes for this purpose. They should not be using needles on multiple animals because apart from the spread of disease, from one animal to the other, the needles also become blunt. So in that regard, animals do suffer if the needles are not sharp when the vaccines or when the vaccinations are being administered. Um, with regards to handling, one should have adequate restraining facilities. Crushers should be available. Um, Prodding should be kept to a minimum to get the animals, into these crushers. If an animal is already moving forward, you should not be prodding that animal. Also, prodding of animals in sensitive areas. You should not prod the animal in the facial region or, the genital area. They should only be prodded on the rump area. And if they are moving, like I said, they should not be prodded. So yes, and the other thing is prodding of animals should only be kept to cattle. You should not be prodding sheep, goats, pigs, and calves, or ostriches for that matter as well, or horses and donkeys. The only animal permissible for prodding is cattle, adult cattle. So during these practices as well, the husbandry practices, the staff that is conducting these um, husbandry practices, they need to be competent in what they are doing. So they should actually be working under the supervision of a veterinarian or an animal health technician if available, because these are experts in their fields as well in terms of how certain practices need to be implemented. Castrations, for instance, can only be done on certain ages of animals. It depends on what practices you are using as well, whether it's a rubber ring around the scrotum, they should be done after a certain age once the testes have descended, but you can't do it too late as well without anesthesia or pain control, for instance. And, if it is a surgical procedure that is invasive, it needs to be done by a suitably qualified person. And if anesthetics are needed or anesthesia and pain control, then obviously it should be under the guidance and supervision of a qualified veterinarian.
Yeah, that's very interesting because let's say when we go to deep down in rural areas where the infrastructure is not up to point, you find that let's say by law, let's say you have to brand or tattoo your animals at a certain age, and then there is no proper infrastructure. We tend to use things, technology that is available, such as immobilizer. What is your take on that?
Are you talking about the electrical
Yes,
immobilization?
yes, yes,
Yes.
yes, yes.
So the National Council of SPCAs is opposed to the use of any implement or device that causes or will cause suffering or lasting harm to an animal. So currently we are engaged with the South African Veterinary Council as well as the South African Health Products Registry. I just can't get it, what the acronym actually, but it's the Health Products Regulatory Authority, sorry, with regards to the immobilizers being used by persons that are ill-trained in terms of its usage and, the voltage and stuff
Mm,
like that. So we are also dealing with a veterinarian who specializes with this, and we are conducting more research into the uses and whether it is permissible to be used by laypersons, for instance. But we are of the opinion that such devices, such medical devices, as an electroimmobilizer should only be used by suitably qualified and trained persons, such as veterinary staff. That includes veterinarians or paraveterinarians, and not just any person, and it should only also be used um, for practices or husbandry practices where it is where the necessity of anesthesia is not required, because some people use them for castration, for instance. Remember, the animal is only being immobilized, so it can still feel pain. So we got to take things like that into consideration as well, that the immobilization of an animal does not prevent the animal from still feeling pain. It only assists the handler to restrain the animal. Remember, the animal is paralyzed,
mm.
but it can still feel pain, it can still vocalize. So those should be things to be cognizant of, that the use of electroimmobilization devices does not anesthetize an animal or does not render it unconscious during certain practices.
Very interesting because of, let's say, when we look into our new era farmers, not only them, even some of the commercial farmers and all that. There is, let's say, now we just went through winter, a lot of cattle, they were in poor conditions. Some of them, they're not being treated accordingly when they are ill. Are there any law in place or is there any penalties if, let's say, a farmer is found with such?
So all animals in South Africa are protected in terms of the provisions of the Animals Protection Act 71 of 1962 as amended. And like I said, the supplementary standards are basically there as guidelines for how animals should be kept and treated. But yes, there are provisions. So if a person willfully neglects to provide veterinary treatment, food, water, shelter, which negatively impacts the welfare of an animal to such a point where it is cruel, then if found guilty in a court of law, the minimum fine imposed on a person, or if a person is found guilty, then the fine is in the region of 40,000 Rand. Obviously, that is subjective. And there is also jail time or incarceration not exceeding 12 months. So a person can get a fine and or jail time, a 40,000 Rand fine, up to 40,000 Rand, or up to 1 year in imprisonment, up to 1 year in prison if found guilty of whatever crime the person is charged with.
Sure. No, that's something that I didn't know because when you drive around, you find some cattle they just eating plastics along the road, and then you just ask yourself where are the owners. And I didn't know that there's such penalties in place.
So yes, whilst these are, I mean, the act is there for all animals, and we do not prosecute each and every case. Like I said, we educate first. So we would go out to a situation that we receive a complaint for, and we will look at the complaint holistically, and we will try and provide practical solutions to the farmers as to how they can improve the situation. If it is in areas where it's the farmers are on municipal land, we will try and get the municipal officials involved as well to try and if there's no water provisions, and if it is within the means of the municipality to provide such, then we will also use those resources to improve the welfare of the animals before we take further drastic actions like prosecution, for instance. So, we try to work with the farmers or with the animal owners to first improve the conditions. We issue written warnings, which states what needs to be complied with, and we give a time frame into which this needs to be rectified by, and then we follow up. And if there's no compliance, we still try to be reasonable up until such point where the welfare of the animal is now severely impacted and we have no alternative then but to get a warrant from the courts, and we will have those animals removed whereby they will get veterinary examination. We get a vet report, which then helps us to find out exactly what extent the animals have suffered, and then we will consider our legal options, which is usually opening of criminal dockets. And yeah, those are the provisions I mentioned before in terms of what the sentences could be.
Hmm,
Up to 40,000 Rand fine or 1 year in imprisonment if found guilty.
sure. Okay.
And,
So,
a criminal record like that, a person then finds it very difficult to gain employment. And you also, in some instances, the accused are deprived of owning firearms, for instance, if the court makes that decision as well.
hmm, very interesting. So, if let's say I'm compliant as a farmer, are there any certification programs that are available that can help me to enhance my reputation?
So the NSPCA, whilst we provide training for the farmers, we issue out educational material. Unfortunately, we do not have any certification programs from the NSPCA. We do keep a register of training when we do conduct training, but that is basically as far as it goes. And there are other organizations, if one looks on the internet, and Google's animal welfare certification, one can get certified. But I'm not sure to what degree this would actually assist getting the farmers' products out there, on the commercial, like on the commercial front as well. But like I said, if one does a Google search, they will find that there are organizations that does do farm animal welfare certification. The reason why the NSPCA is hesitant to actually get involved in such schemes is because previously we would go to farms, we would um, I wouldn't, for want of a better word, endorse farms to say that we found everything to be in order. But then when you go back to the same farm, we find that there's issues, which now is contradictory to the certification or the document that we previously issued stating that there were no issues found. And it does contradict the piece of paper that we previously issued, because now in terms of prosecution, you get the defense arguing, but the NSPCA did not find any problems on my client's farm. They even issued a document to say how good things were, and now they are prosecuting my client. So in that regard, we have, as an organization, we have decided not to endorse any facility in the country. Um, where there's issues of compliance, we issue written instructions or warnings to basically improve the conditions or to comply in terms of the Animals Protection Act. But if we do not find any issues, we do not leave it in writing that everything was found to be in order, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely that makes sense because I think, let's say, from my side, looking at from red meat point of view, you find some of the consumers, they say they don't want to eat our produce anymore because of how these animals are being ill-treated, maybe also with the slaughtering procedures that maybe do them in informal settlement. That also plays a role. But then now that poses a question to say, how can farmers collaborate with you to promote those best practices to advocate for better animal welfare in their communities?
So if there are any organizations, I know there's AFASA, the African Farmers Association of South Africa, and the South African Farmers Development Association. I'm not sure whether these organizations are representative of the entire emergent farmer community or population within the country. If organizations like this extends a request for training, with the different communities across the country or within these organizations, we will gladly provide training and document the training in terms of the delegates that attended. Unfortunately, like I said, we could possibly issue certificates of attendance. I would have to check with our training unit as well because they are more involved in that um, line. But if I think we could provide certificate of attendances, which states that farmers have attended an animal welfare course in terms of farm animal welfare. We could think of something like that, but we would need farming or emerging farmer organizations, like NARPO, for instance, to reach out to the NSPCA to say we would like your organization to provide or present on animal welfare and what is the legal requirements in terms of the Animals Protection Act or the standards to our group of delegates, for instance. In that regard, we'll gladly assist. And like I said, we could issue certificates of attendance to show that these delegates then did undergo some sort of training in that regard.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. I didn't know that you also offer training to the communities. Surely from now you're going to get a lot of inquiries related to that. Do you do it as an individual or maybe just any particular group, let's say in a community? Because we find even those non-structured, I won't say non-structured, but let's say non-registered, like you are NERP or NALFA or so, like they can just decide to say, this is what we want to educate our farmers with, and then can we invite you over? Are you also open for that?
Yes, 100%. We get a lot of requests if we go to a different area of the country and we come to an abattoir, for instance, and then the abattoir in addition to the Red Meat Abattoir Association training that they require, that's undertaken with their personnel, they also then want some sort of training, further training from the NSPCA. So we do help abattoirs in that regard as well. We haven't really had much requests from the emergent sector, but from our side, we take it upon ourselves. If we are in an area and we find that there's enough delegates within a farming community, whether they are not structured or whether they don't belong to any formalized organization, we do take it upon ourselves. We deal with the community leaders then to say we'll be back on certain day, try and identify a venue where we can do a presentation. So whilst we don't wait for requests, we do take it upon ourselves to go out and provide training if there is a need within a certain community, for instance.
And then on the training, you also do like some practicals to demonstrate on how you can, let's say, move your animals in more human manner. More especially, let's say, looking at the fact that, let's say, a lot of people, they are used to use like Proda to move their animals. So I do understand that that also causes some stress and to a certain extent can cause some injuries. So do you also like try all means to be practical on finding the solutions for that?
Definitely, I mean, practicality is something that is easily learned. If you show a person how to do something practically, it has more impact than theoretical. So we do have a theoretical component as well as practical. Like you spoke about prodders, as an example. So if we are doing practicals, we will not use a prodder on an animal because whilst we are opposed to the use of prodders, we know it is something that is a necessity. So we will educate the farmers on where to use the prodder, how to use the prodder, what frequency it needs to be used, what animals needs, it can be used on. So whilst we ourselves will not use the prodder, we still take into consideration that it is a necessary tool used in the right manner. So yes, and then obviously we would use or advocate more humane methods of moving animals, such as pig boards, for instance, or rattlers. You can use a plastic bottle filled with stones attached to a long pipe. So the use of rattlers is more humane than a prodder, for instance. Just shaking something like that will get animals moving. We also use flight zones of the animals to show farmers how to get an animal moving. If you're standing directly behind an animal, for like cattle, for instance, it can't see you. So you got to use the animal's flight zones to get an animal to move in a certain direction. So you will stand sort of 45 degrees next to the field of vision of an animal and wave your hands or wave a flag or a rattle, to get the animals moving. So we do things like that to show the communities how to humanely move animals and, to prevent tails being twisted, for instance, or excessive beating of animals with sticks or the excessive use of prodders, for instance. So yes, practical examples and practical solutions and humane solutions is what we also try to advocate for. Obviously it's to engender a compassion for animals. So whatever we do is always with how is it going to impact the animal in a positive way. So all of our training methods that we use obviously is to engender compassion for animals and to try and use, even if something is legal, but to try and stay away from it and use a more humane approach, like prodders, for instance, and like I've explained, to use plastic bottles filled with stones or whatever the case may be to get to move animals in a certain direction.
Hmm. Let me give you the last question because I think this is some of the things that are more practical. Like you find, looking at the cattle side, you find uh, some of the breeds or some of the animals that are of high in temperament, and then you find like farmers just they, how they handle them is not an appropriate manner, and they think that is right. Uh, how can you advise them on that note? Example, let's say Brahman is been known for such, but I always argue to say you chose the wrong Brahman, not the breed have a problem, but you didn't select well when coming to the temperament.
So, like remember, farming is apart from it being a calling, a lot of people have now taken it upon themselves as a career choice. So, or a business. When conducting business, you have to basically do research beforehand. So you need to know what animals you're dealing with. You need to familiarize yourself with a particular breed. We all know Brahman cattle are very, very difficult. So when you are taking on that responsibility of choosing to farm with them, you need to basically, like I said, research. You got to research. You maybe join a breed society. So you have knowledge of the characteristics of these animals or the breed, for instance, and get whatever necessary equipment is required to be working with the specific breed, for instance. Obviously, being cognizant of the fact that there's the Animals Protection Act that you also need to contend with. So I think before just delving into any farming enterprise, be it cattle, pigs, whatever animals, it's irrespective. One needs to do thorough research on that farming enterprise to find out whether the person is adept or competent or has the time to work with such animals and to basically weigh the pros and cons. Is me as a farmer taking on such and such animal going to find me on the wrong side of the law, for instance? We need to also, look at that. It's glamorous to be a farmer. It's not, well, it's not glamorous. In fact, it's far from that. It's a 24/7, 365, as I'm sure everyone knows already. But I think in terms of the legal requirements, one needs to do research to choose what is right for their conditions and for their uh, practical experiences with these animals and qualifications. I think a person should have some sort of background knowledge before delving into a certain practice. Are you still there?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Yes, I'm saying thank you so much for answering some burning questions from my side, and then now I'm going to open it to the floor for people to start to interact and ask questions from their side.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then I'll just request that if, let's say, you can just raise your hand, then I'll pick you up. Then we take it from there. Okay. All right. Any hand? Anybody has a question? Silence, it means you have covered all the important questions that they had.
It appears so.
Yeah, it appears so. You can also maybe text in the chat box if you're not comfortable in speaking up. Right. In absence of questions, is there anything that you'd like to share with the farmers, or any last remarks that you want to make?
Yes, thank you again, Khomotso. So the NSPCA, I would like to reiterate, the NSPCA and the SPCAs across the country, we should not be seen as enemies. In fact, it's the opposite of that. We are not opposed to farming. We are opposed to the various practices that impact negatively on an animal's well-being, which causes cruelty and everlasting harm. So we should not be seen as an organization that is trying to stop farmers from making a living or from using or utilizing animals. When in doubt, we are also here to provide advice. We do have experts in our fields within the different units that I spoke about early. So we can also be contacted, for advice, or if there's any concerns that farmers may have, or if they find that there's things that are being done that is concerning to them, we will also keep all any information that is given to us, we keep it highly confidential. If a farmer is concerned about someone that is not doing things according to how it should be done. We will investigate, such concerns with the strictest of confidence or confidentiality, sorry. So we will not say who complained, but we will go out and address those concerns. We can be contacted on 011 907 3590. That's Johannesburg, 907 3590. And any concerns can also be emailed to farm, that's FARM at nspca.co.za. Or persons that are interested can also go to our website and look at what we do. We do have a section dealing with farm animals only. So the website is www.nspca.co.za.
Right. No,
If there are persons who want to have a look at the website for further clarity on what we do.
oh, thank you so much, Navesh. I highly appreciate for your attendance and also making up for us to be able to share this important and also insightful information with our farmers. We highly appreciate your time, and we hope that you're going to have a very lovely festive season.
Thank you. And the same to you, Khomotso, and to the rest of the panel. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much. Farmers, please bear in mind that this session was recorded. It can also, as I indicated, is going to be put on our Red Meat Industry Services YouTube channel. Please follow up for more. If, let's say, you have other questions, you saw his email that is there. If, let's say, you want to inquire about something that you missed during the session, he's always available to be of your assistant. From my side, Khomotso Mashiloane, thank you so much for your attendance. I wish you all the best in your farming endeavors. We are here as RMIS to empower you to thrive with knowledge. Thank you all.